If you're a mother or father and you have reached your limit with your kids and sometimes just lost it and raised your voice and shouted and demanded with authority to get them to do something, and you're beating yourself up about it because you feel, oh my God, I shouldn't be that way. That's not the way a mommy or daddy should be, because you read some sort of a ideal, moral, hypocritical construct about how you're always supposed to be peaceful. Well, I just like to share with you something. If you go and tell your child, Johnny, could you please clean your room? And they don't do it in a certain time frame, you'll probably say, Johnny, didn't I tell you to clean your room? And if they still don't do it, you'll probably say, Johnny, I think I told you to clean the room. And at first you're asking to clean your room, and after a while you start to tell them as an authority. You know, you're starting out kind of equal, and then you kind of get up into authority because you're not getting what you want. You're not somehow getting it to the point where they're getting a value out of doing it, so they're not doing it. And finally you get to a point where you say, Johnny, I don't want to have to tell you again, clean your room. And when you seem like you're trying to communicate with somebody and you can't seem to get it across because you're not matching their values, you're talking in your values and projecting onto them, but they're not getting their values met out of it, so they're not engaged and not inspired to do what you want, you're probably going to get gestorial, and you'll start to make gestures with your body, and you'll start to get more assertive with it, and eventually you'll probably shout, and if it goes even further, you'll probably get really assertive and aggressive even. It kind of escalates if you don't get to your outcome because you were demanding an outcome as an authority of the parent. I pay for everything, and it's my house, and your kids live in here, and I set the rules, and you get all kind of arrogant about it. If you get to a point where you escalate like that and then feel guilty because you've heard on some daily TV show or maybe read a book or heard somebody on some podcast or whatever about you shouldn't do that, thou shalt not do that, that's bad, it's a bad parent or whatever. Well, I did some surveys really interesting and asked people if there was anybody in the room that didn't have a shouting or aggressive parent at times. Not one person had their hand up. Everybody had that. That was kind of like they all had it. And then I've said, how many of you who have kids have gotten to a point where you've gotten assertive and aggressive and raised your voice and shouted at them at times? And people all admitted it. So I know what maybe the fantasy and moral hypocrisy ideal is. I know what people think it should be and ought to be and supposed to be and got to be and have to be and must. And the no tolerance for anything but this ideal. But I also understand human behavior, and human behavior is going to, if it doesn't know how to communicate, it's going to do those kind of reactions. Now, if you know what your child's highest value is, and you communicate what you want them to do in terms of those highest values of them, and they feel they're getting met what they want by you having them do what you want, then you probably don't have to do that. You'll just communicate effectively in their values and may not escalate. But sometimes you're not always thinking about their values. You're just abrupt, you're in a hurry, you just speak and you get authoritative and it escalates. I wouldn't beat myself up about it. I would use it as a feedback mechanism and attempt to identify what it is that is important to them, because they'll spontaneously do what's important to them, but they're not going to spontaneously do what you think is important unless they can win out of it and care enough, just like a sales process. They're going to buy what you have to offer unless you meet their needs. So your kids are no different. So you might want to take the time to go find out what their real values, highest values are on my website, drdemartini.com, and practice communicating it in a way and think in advance before I tell them what to do. How will they win out of it in their values? You probably have less escalation. But if you don't, and you get abrupt, and you get kind of self-righteous, and you demand your kids to do things, and you yell at them or whatever, I wouldn't label that the end of the world. Because in life, in the real world, your kids are going to be dealing with that anyway. They're going to have that in restaurants and in grocery stores and airports and at work, and they're going to have customers that are not always pleased. life is going to have both support and challenge, and kind and cruel, and nice and mean, and positive and negative, and soft and harsh, and gentle and aggressive. I mean, welcome to life. I always say the more you're addicted to one pole, the more the other side of the pole has to come in and smack you to break your addiction, because when you're addicted to a one-sided world, you become juvenilely dependent on that addiction. And so the nature brings in the other side to wake you up and get you precociously independent and grow again. So don't set an unrealistic expectation of yourself to be zero tolerance for one-sidedness. Embrace yourself as a human being. Learn from each of those experiences. Practice communicating as the way you best you can in terms of children's values or anybody's values the best you can. Although I can tell you, I'm familiar with values for 47 years, and sometimes I don't. I don't want to give people false impressions. It's life. Give yourself a little leeway there and allow yourself to be a human being, and also realize your children are going to be human beings, and they're going to be surrounded by human beings, and they're all going to be living by this moral hypocritical ideal. So relax. Do your best to communicate effectively where you don't have to raise and escalate, but just know you'll go farther if you communicate in their values than if you don't. But if you do escalate, don't make it the end of the world. Just learn from it. Go back and dialogue with your children or whoever you're having the escalation with, and work it through. Come out on the other side of it. It's life. And frankly, your kids are going to need a bit of that in their life somewhere along the line before they're facing the real world out there, because the real world's going to have it. So love yourself, even though you're comparing yourself to something that's, we go around and say we're not perfect unless we're one-sided. That's BS. The perfect you is the person that has both sides. And you're sometimes both-sided. When people support your values, you're nice as a pussycat. When people challenge your values, like your kids sometimes, you can be mean as a tiger. Welcome to life. I am that way. You're that way. Don't live in a fantasy. And embrace the wholeness of who you are, and allow the kids to also be facing the wholeness of who they are, and do your best to communicate as effective as you can in their values. And you'll probably not as many extremes, but I don't know of anybody that can honestly say they don't have that at sometimes. So I don't want to set up an unrealistic expectation.